Clear your desk by the end of the day, Holly. Human resources will handle the exit paperwork. The words on my computer screen blurred as I read them again, over and over, until the letters lost shape. My throat tightened, my pulse hammered. After 5 years of service, 5 years of building something I believed in, all it took was one cold, impersonal email to erase me. 3 days. That was all I had taken. 3 days to bury my father, 3 days of approved bereavement leave. And now my absence had been painted as betrayal. My name is Holly Peterson. I am 34 years old, and until approximately 2 minutes ago, I was the regional team lead of the highest performing division at Summit Edge Logistics. I had spent years creating not just a department but a family. We celebrated birthdays together, covered for each other during illnesses, and worked late nights on deadlines side by side, and in a heartbeat it was gone. The Boise office was still dim in the early morning light. I had come in before sunrise, eager to catch up on the work I had missed while saying goodbye to my father. Instead, I found betrayal waiting in my inbox. The email claimed that business needs had shifted and accused me of failing to maintain adequate presence during critical operational periods. My father's death had apparently landed in one of those undefined critical periods. I didn't cry. I didn't slam my fist on the desk or storm into Dan Weaver's office, the same supervisor who had signed my leave approval last week. Instead, I took a photo of the email and forwarded it to my personal account. Then I shut down my computer and began to pack. My hands moved slowly, carefully wrapping the small cactus my team had given me last Christmas, sliding my framed photos into a box, stacking years of handwritten thank you notes from people I had mentored. 5 years reduced to cardboard and tape. By the time my coworkers trickled in, half my desk was bare. Tanya from accounting was the first to notice. "Holly, what's happening?" she whispered, her eyes wide. "I've been let go," I said flatly, and the words tasted like rust. "What? Why?" Apparently attending my father's funeral wasn't showing proper priority for my work. Her mouth fell open, outrage blazing across her face. "That's not right. You should talk to Paula. She'd never—" I shook my head and kept packing. "It's done, Tanya." Dan made his decision. One by one my team arrived: Jason, Ethan, Veronica, Louise, Kayla. The news spread in low, angry whispers. Veronica's eyes filled with tears, Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. By 9:30, all 7 of them stood in a circle around my desk, silent, furious, helpless. "You can't leave," Veronica sobbed. "The Wilson renewal is next week. The Hernandez contract is in negotiations. None of us knows the system like you do." I sealed my box with one final strip of tape. Dan should have thought of that before he fired me for burying my father. The words hung heavy in the air. Soil still clung to my shoes from the graveside service just days ago. My father was gone, the wound raw and open, and now this betrayal layered on top of grief. A sharp voice cut through the silence. "Everyone back to your desks." Dan Weaver stood at the end of the aisle, arms crossed, face tight with disapproval. His voice rose when no one moved. Now, slowly, reluctantly, my team dispersed. Their eyes, however, stayed on me, angry, loyal, promising. Dan approached, his voice lower. "This could have been handled more discreetly if you'd waited until the end of the day." I looked him straight in the eye. "Like the discretion you showed firing me by email after approving my leave." For a split second I saw something flicker in his expression. Uncertainty. Maybe even shame. But then his jaw tightened. "Business needs change rapidly. Summit Edge requires people who understand shifting priorities. Your father's passing was unfortunate, but—" "Don't finish that sentence," I whispered, my voice deadly calm. He adjusted his tie and stepped back. "HR is expecting you." I picked up my box. "Don't worry, I won't make a scene. But remember this moment, Dan. You might find it important later." The HR office was sterile, white walls, muted carpet, the faint smell of coffee. Barbara Kent, the new HR officer, looked uncomfortable as she slid the separation papers across the desk. 2 weeks severance, a non-compete clause, and a reminder not to disparage the company. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Holly. And I'm very sorry about your father." "Thank you," I murmured, though the words felt hollow. When she asked why I showed her the email, her professional mask cracked. "This is abrupt," she said, eyes narrowing. "It is," I replied, signing my name with steady hands. "But Summit Edge can do what it wants. Just like I can." By the time I left the building, the September air outside was warm against my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Jason, Veronica, Ethan, one message after another. This is wrong. What can we do? Are you okay? Dan's a coward. Their outrage poured into my hands through the screen. I set the box gently in the trunk of my car, sat in the driver's seat, and let myself breathe. My father used to tell me, standing knee-deep in the Boise River with a fishing rod, "The river moves, Holly girl, but the rocks stay steady. Be like the rocks." The river was rushing now, threatening to sweep me away. But I would be steady, steadier than they ever expected. I drove aimlessly after leaving Summit Edge, the box of my belongings rattling in the trunk with each turn. My father's voice kept echoing in my head, telling me to be steady, but steadiness felt impossible when everything inside me quaked with grief and rage. I ended up at Riverside Park, the same place my father used to take me fishing when I was a child. I sat on a bench overlooking the river, watching the water churn under a cloudy September sky. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry, not just for the loss of my father, but for the loss of the life I had built at Summit Edge. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Veronica. "We're all meeting at Jason's tonight. Please come." When I arrived at Jason's house that evening, I was greeted by the entire team. The dining table was covered with files, laptops, and half-empty coffee cups. They weren't just there to comfort me, they were plotting. Ethan spoke first. "Holly, we know what Dan did was wrong. The way he treated you after everything you built, it's unforgivable. We've been talking and we don't want to stay at Summit Edge anymore." I blinked, stunned. "What are you saying?" "We're saying we're with you," Veronica said firmly. "Wherever you go, we go. You've been our leader, not Dan. We're not going to let him get away with this." Emotion tightened my throat. These were the people I had mentored, celebrated birthdays with covered shifts for when their kids were sick. They were my second family. And now they were offering me their loyalty when I felt most abandoned. That night we drafted emails documenting everything. The denial of my raises despite exceeding targets. The verbal harassment, the way Dan had taken credit for my projects in executive meetings. But most damning of all was the email I had received that morning. The proof that I had been fired for attending my father's funeral after approved leave. I uploaded it all to a secure folder, one my father would have been proud of me for setting up. He had always taught me to keep records, to never trust someone who tells you not to write things down. The next day, while the team reluctantly reported to work, I took a call from an unfamiliar number. The man introduced himself as Richard Lowell, CEO of Canyon Freight Solutions, Summit Edge's fiercest competitor. "I've heard about your departure," he said, his voice measured. "Let me be frank. Summit Edge just made a grave mistake. I've been following your division's performance for years. I'd like to meet with you." For a moment I was speechless. "You want to hire me?" "Not just hire you. I want you to build something here, something Summit Edge won't see coming." I agreed to meet him the following week. But before that meeting, I had one more thing to do. I called Barbara from HR, the only person who had shown me genuine sympathy on my way out. When she answered, I said simply, "Barbara, I need you to look into something. It's about Dan." She hesitated. "Holly, I could lose my job." "You'll lose your soul if you stay silent," I replied softly. There was a long pause. Then she sighed. "Send me what you have." That night I forwarded her the entire folder. By the end of the week, rumors were swirling through Summit Edge. Dan was under investigation, executives had seen the email chain, and my former team whispered updates to me from the inside, their loyalty unshaken. On the day of my meeting with Canyon Freight, I stood before the mirror smoothing my blazer. My father's old wristwatch gleamed on my arm, the one he had worn to every important moment of his life. "Be the rock," I whispered. As I walked into Richard Lowell's office, I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, the loss of my father raw and aching, but underneath it pulsed something else, resolve. Dan thought he had ended me, but what he had really done was free me. Richard Lowell's office overlooked the skyline, sunlight pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows. He was a sharp man, older than Dan, but his handshake was firm, his eyes steady in a way that carried both confidence and trust. "Holly," he said, gesturing for me to sit, "I've seen what you've built. You didn't just manage a division, you created loyalty, efficiency, and growth. That can't be faked." For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. Not as a replaceable cog, not as a line item to be deleted in an email, but as someone who mattered. Richard slid a folder across the table. Director of Operations. Competitive salary. Full autonomy to build your team. I won't tell you how to lead, I'll give you the tools and you'll show me results. My throat tightened as I looked at the offer. I thought of my father, how he had worked 2 jobs to put me through school, how he had taught me to fight for my place in the world. If he were here, he'd say, "Take it, Holly girl. Show them your worth." I accepted. Within 2 weeks I was seated in a new office overlooking a different skyline, and within another 2, one by one, my old team from Summit Edge walked through the doors of Canyon Freight. Ethan first, then Veronica, then Jason and Kayla. Each of them resigned from Summit Edge carrying with them not just loyalty to me, but knowledge of client systems and relationships Dan had taken for granted. Canyon Freight grew stronger by the day, and Summit Edge began to falter. By April, industry news outlets were buzzing. Key clients defect to Canyon Freight Solutions. Summit Edge faces operational delays. Executives scrambled for answers, but Dan had none. The projects I had once nurtured were unraveling under his care. Meanwhile, Barbara from HR kept me updated in whispers and late-night texts. The investigation had confirmed everything. The board had seen the email. Dan had violated company policy, firing me under false pretenses while using critical needs as his shield. Worse, several other complaints surfaced, patterns of him sidelining women, taking credit for others' work, and covering up errors he had made. When Barbara told me he was on the verge of being ousted, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. The scars were still too fresh, but I felt something stirring, just as slow but certain. One evening, Richard called me into his office. "We've just secured the Wilson renewal," he said, smiling. "The same contract Summit Edge was counting on. Their loss, our gain." I sat back in my chair, exhaling. "Dan's probably furious." Richard studied me carefully. "Are you?" I paused, then shook my head. "No, I'm free. Let him drown in the mess he made." But the truth was, part of me still wanted to face him. To stand in front of Dan and make him hear the words I had swallowed in silence. That chance came sooner than I expected. The State Logistics Conference was held in June, a massive gathering of companies and leaders in the industry. Canyon Freight had a booth, and I was scheduled to present on operational resilience. I stepped onto the stage, slides glowing behind me, a sea of professionals watching. My team sat in the front row, their eyes shining with pride. Halfway through my talk, I spotted him. Dan Weaver, standing stiff at the back of the room, arms crossed, jaw tight. My pulse quickened, but I kept speaking, my voice steady, confident. "Resilience is not about avoiding hardship," I said. "It's about how you respond when hardship comes. Companies that value people, that honor humanity, will outlast those that treat employees as disposable." The audience applauded, some nodding knowingly. I saw Dan shift uncomfortably, his face pale. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of him. I wasn't even angry. I was beyond him. Afterwards, several executives from other companies came forward offering congratulations, exchanging cards. I caught a glimpse of Dan leaving the hall, his shoulders slumped, no one following him. That was the difference. He had authority, but I had loyalty. And loyalty always wins. As summer deepened, Canyon Freight flourished. I worked long hours, yes, but they were hours that built something meaningful. My team thrived, our clients trusted us, and for the first time in years I felt whole. But the story wasn't finished yet. Summit Edge was unraveling faster than anyone expected, and Dan's reckoning was only beginning. By late summer, Summit Edge was in free fall. Reports leaked that 3 more major contracts had defected to Canyon Freight, and internal audits revealed operational chaos. What had once been touted as a model of stability was now a cautionary tale whispered at industry mixers. Barbara called me one evening, her voice hushed but urgent. "It's official, Holly. The board forced Dan to resign. He walked out today, no farewell, no applause, just silence. They blamed him for everything." For a long moment I sat in silence, staring at the twilight sky outside my office window. I thought I would feel vindicated, triumphant even. Instead I felt empty. Because his downfall didn't bring my father back. It didn't erase the sting of losing my job the way I did. It didn't erase the grief that had made me fragile enough to be broken. But then I looked around me at the photos on my desk of Ethan and Emily, the twins, of my closest colleague Veronica, at the sticky notes my team had left with little drawings and encouragements, at the calendar, full of projects that mattered. And I realized this was my vindication. Not Dan's fall, but my rise. 2 weeks later, the State Business Journal asked to interview me. The headline read, "From Fired to Fierce, How Holly Peterson Transformed Setback into Success." In the article, I didn't mention Dan by name. I spoke instead about resilience, about valuing people, about what my father had taught me, that when the river runs fast, you don't fight it, you anchor yourself in what matters. My words spread farther than I expected. Emails flooded in from strangers, single mothers, young professionals, even retirees. "I was treated like you, and I almost gave up. Thank you for reminding me to stand tall. Your story gave me courage to leave a toxic job." Each message felt like another stitch mending a part of me I hadn't realized was torn. Then one autumn morning I received a message that stopped me cold. It was from Dan. "I know you'll never forgive me, but I wanted to say I was wrong. You were the best leader Summit Edge had. I let my pride blind me. I hope one day you'll understand." I stared at the words for a long time. A year ago I would have crafted a fiery reply, cutting and precise. But now I simply closed the message. He wasn't part of my story anymore. I had written him out, and I intended to keep it that way. Instead, I walked out onto the balcony of Canyon Freight's headquarters, the crisp autumn air cool against my skin. The city stretched below me, alive and humming. My team had just secured another major deal, and the future was wide open. I thought of my father again, of the way he'd steady my hands as I held a fishing rod, whispering, "Be patient, Holly girl. The line will tug when it's time." The line had tugged, and I had answered. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy, my father's and now mine. To those of you watching, I want you to hear this. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us, to lead us, to value us, will fail. They'll betray us, discard us, call us replaceable. But you are not disposable. You are not your title or your paycheck or the approval of people who don't see your worth. You are the rock in the rushing river. You can stand steady even when the current rages. If my story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs strength today. Subscribe for more and leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever turned betrayal into your turning point? I would love to hear your journey.